Welcome back. Today, we'll be talking about freedom, surveillance, and the struggle to remain human in the modern age. We live in a time where information multiplies faster than we can process it. AI makes creating and spreading information easier and faster than ever. It reminds me of an old question. When we gain the power to access all information, do we also gain the power to destroy ourselves? Technology has always been double-edged. Nuclear power can light up cities or destroy them. AI can help us understand the world or lose us in a maze of information. The deeper question is, are we ready for this kind of power? Do we have enough wisdom to guide its development? Somewhere between truth and obedience lies the real power. Authoritarian systems demand more than silence. They require inner agreement. A unified narrative must not only be spoken, it must be imagined as well. That's how control works, when the system no longer needs to watch you because you've internalized the watcher. In a simpler manner, everyone has become the inspectors of others. In this way, totalitarianism is embedded into the society. And in its finest form, no governing bodies are needed. Instead, acts of human beings are what's lacking. But the irony is that this very completeness is its weakness. Its weak point lies in the pursuit of totality. Rigid systems can't breathe, and just as no child stays fixed in one thought forever, history too grows restless. This restlessness, Hegel believed, was the movement towards freedom. The historical progress towards a specific goal is what Hegel believed as the realization and path towards freedom. In this instance, the lack of ambiguity and flexibility restrained how totalitarian regimes adapt to the moving parts of historical development. The world will change, everything will be transformed alongside the progress towards the ultimate ideal. What unites them is the belief that being is never still. The history, like a river, reshapes the stones we build our homes with. Whether it is the mind for Hegel or a new metaphysics for Heidegger and Nietzsche, philosophers admit that the world never stays constant. What stays constant is the self, the realization of existence and being. Democracies, on the other hand, invite contradiction. They do not seek unity, but tolerable dissonance. Multiple narratives compete, collect, collide, and correct. And somehow, in the chaos, something reassembling truth emerges. According to the theory of revolution, the fittest of all survives. In this case, the most tenacious and well-recognized ideas will prevail as the new worldview. These ideas are shaped by culture transactions, historical movements, and the development of philosophy. One famous example being the study of science, a subject built on the art of questioning and debating. Coincidentally, it is in these contradictions that truth emerges out of thin air, where no one expected so beforehand. But chaos too has its dangers. When people stop listening, when attention dissolves into noise, democracy becomes its own echo chamber. Not oppressive, just hollow. Not a collapse, but a forgetting. Forgetting the whole purpose of modern philosophy, of how humans came to be what they are right now. History repeats itself in concealed forms. The search for the ultimate answer is merely the consequence of the same mistake over and over again. I never played soccer, not because I hated it, but but because the field always felt too circular, too enclosed, like it demanded a rhythm I didn't share. Other boys became figures, symbols, admired by teachers. I crouched by trees. There was one teacher, nature class, who no one respected. She had no presence, no discipline, no charisma, but she let me watch the ants move across the backs of the leaves. That's when I first noticed the tree. Its leaves looked like they didn't belong in this century. I imagined it was a tree left behind by some older world, a world that didn't care about systems, approval, or structure, just wind, silence, and the slow unfolding of form. Now I wonder if I've always been trying to build some kind of shelter out of those leaves. A sword, an umbrella, a walking stick, something to carry into systems we are told we must join, not to fight, maybe, just to remember how it felt to crouch beside the roots and not need to explain why. So, how should we seek balance in this information-flooded age? Balance of what, you may ask? Well, a balance between wisdom and stupidity, between naiveness and maturity, between genius and bizarre. Perhaps true wisdom lies not in having all the answers, but in knowing how to ask the right questions. Not in eliminating all uncertainty, but in learning to coexist with uncertainty. To lower our expectations of any single system, and to see systems as servants rather than emperors. Only then will human beings regain their lost sense of self, of subjectivity, because that subjectivity was consumed by effects of justifying, of reclaiming. Whether democrat or authoritarian, none is perfect. Any system, when pushed to extremes, will deviate from its original purpose. In this lost world, we rely on these intangible intersubjective realities to reflect the self. As our subjective view is ripped away from us, the sense of self, of being, of subject are lost and forgotten in the process of convincing oneself that there is a perfect, all-well political system. Yet, it is these people who are governed and restricted by the system, not those deciding or controlling the mechanisms. How ironic. Those who have power within the system remain conscious about the situation, but people who are products and sacrifices of that organization have put complete faith into it. As George Orwell famously said, ignorance is bliss. Blissfulness is observed subjectively, while ignorance can only be perceived from the outside. Subjectivity hindered our ability to see the self in an objective manner. Therefore, only those whose subjectivity is stripped from them can discern their own ignorance. But by that stage, it's too late to change anything. There's a paradox buried at the core of modern systems. Of course, there are paradoxes, because paradoxes drives historical progression, Hegel would say. Authoritarian regimes collapse under the weight of their own rigidity. They demand not only obedience, but belief. Yet belief itself can act as both the most potent and the most vulnerable human emotion, often at the same time. A soldier can sacrifice their lives for a belief in nations. A person can also betray the very belief of self, of being, for some material artificial pleasures, which seems incompatible given that they are living organisms can sense their own existence. Authoritarian regimes build unity through repetition and suppress contradiction, because contradiction threatens the image of totality. Hegel understood this kind of failure. For him, history moves through contradiction. Progress doesn't come from stability, but from conflict between what a system claims to be and what it actually is. Freedom is not static. Existence is not static, nor anything in the world remains static. It emerges through tension, through oppression. When a system tries to remove contradiction, it doesn't create peace, it halts movement. And anything that doesn't move breaks, like a string pulled too tight. But democratic systems aren't immune either. They do not silence contradiction. Instead, they multiply it. They present more narratives, more voices, more angles. In theory, this leads to self-correction, self-adjustment, the longing utopia fantasy of freedom and evolution. Competing views refine each other, and something closer to truth emerges. Not through unity, but through tension. Yet, even here, there's danger. French philosopher Michel Foucault warned of a new kind of power, not the visible kind that locks people up, but one that operates in how people think. The Panopticon wasn't just a prison, it was a model of power. You don't need guards if people believe they're being watched. Over time, they start watching themselves. They shape their actions, thoughts, and identities in anticipation of being seen, being viewed by others. Slowly over time, this longing of attention becomes an inner desire, reflected through the modern lenses of social media. Where yearning at least meets its answer. This impulse illuminates the self, a different kind of self that constantly monitors one's every move, every decision. And eventually, the system doesn't need to enforce rules because individuals internalize themselves. And that's how power becomes efficient, when surveillance becomes self-regulation. This is the subtle failure of modern freedom. It's no longer about being told what to do. It's about performing who you think you're supposed to be. Online, in school, in relationships, we craft images, suppress thoughts, preempt judgment, and it often feels like a choice. That's what makes it so difficult to escape. Performance is blending into life itself. We are now the actors, the ones being seen, not the ones seeing. We grew into objects, and social media evolved into the subject. This is exactly what Marx meant when he described ideology, not as lies, but a structure of beliefs so embedded that people accept it as reality. We don't see power because it feels normal. We don't resist because we don't recognize the need to. We mistake dependence for independence, control for freedom, and production for purpose. Modernity promised the opposite. It promised individualism, autonomy, and progress. But in exchange, it slowly eroded inner life. Time became scheduled, work became central, expression became performance. A hollowing of interiority. People began to lose not just meaning, but the capacity to reflect on meaning. The loss of subjectivity in the age of attention dependence. That's why many feel tired, restless, and numb, not because something is wrong in the dramatic sense, but because something essential is missing and they don't know what it is. The system provides everything except the tools to question it, the tools to gain back the subjectivity of individual autonomy. And maybe that's the real answer. Can you live inside a system without becoming it? Or better, can a person still protect their interior life? Thoughts not meant to be shared, feelings not shaped by trends, time not measured by productivity, within a world that commodifies everything. Saint Augustine once said, "To err is human, but to persist in error is diabolical." History doesn't ask for our consent, it just moves forward. Those swept alongside by history bear those scars and the burdens of becoming history's silent authors and presenters. Those who live only on the surface will never understand the world's underlying patterns and can only become dispensable hurts in history's progress, often neglecting the bustle nature of reality. Information is both the thread that connects us and the screen that separates us. Understanding this paradox might be the beginning of understanding modern life. We are all dust particles in a vast universe of information, seeking our place, our home, our meaning. However, if you hold thoughts like the night will eventually pass and light will embrace everyone, I might pour cold water on you. No, I hate the expression pour cold water. It's more accurate to say that raindrops about to fall from the sky will make you shiver and abandon such illusions. Because in my view, night will never disappear. Night is the most tranquil and wonderful. If you don't believe me, temporarily set aside those terrible thoughts swaying in your heart and look at the dark night sky. You'll always find the new insignificant points of light. What are they? They're gray dust scattered by the universe across the black canvas. But maybe that's enough. Maybe being gray dust in a beautiful painting, it's in its own kind of magic. Thank you for listening today. See you next time.